A blazing scene opens inside a dimensional rift, where three legendary warriors of humanity have just worked together to defeat the demon god king. Eric and Goran are ready to retreat, but Luck is still focused on analyzing the enemy's remaining magic, almost as if the collapsing battlefield is less important than a rare research sample in front of him. Goran teases Luck for spending every day buried in research, which may explain why he still has no girlfriend. Luck does not even bother arguing. To him, the demon god king's magical structure is clearly far more fascinating than romance. While others see danger on a battlefield, Luck sees a free laboratory. When the topic turns to family, Eric and Goran regret that they have been fighting for so long that they missed the birth of their daughters. They worry that their children may not recognize them when they return. Goran reassures them that family bonds do not disappear just because of a few years apart, and that casual line unintentionally gives Luck the excuse to make a shocking decision soon after. Suddenly, countless demon gods pour out of the void. Eric and Goran have not even drawn their weapons before Luck steps forward, creates a glowing magic circle, and raises a barrier to block the two of them. With his back turned to his comrades, he delivers the classic line, "Leave this place to me, you two go on ahead." In most stories, that line is almost a death sentence, but in Luck's case, it becomes the beginning of 10 years of unpaid overtime. Eric and Goran immediately object, but Luck reminds them that their wives and children are waiting outside. To him, the two of them are also his family. That logic leaves his comrades moved and unable to argue. The barrier is already up, the way back is sealed, and they can only retreat while trusting him. Alone, Luck faces the demon god army. Every enemy that charges at him is destroyed, but his body gradually approaches its limit. Just then, a female demon god general appears. With horns, a tail, and a purple aura, she immediately uses Drain to steal his life force and magic power. The demon god general believes victory is already hers. However, she does not realize that Luck's passion for magical research is even stronger than his survival instinct. He does not rush to break the spell. Instead, he deliberately lets himself get hit, studies the structure of the magic, and searches for a way to reverse the flow of energy. As a result, the skill that was meant to drain him becomes a source of recovery instead. She thinks she is absorbing Luck's power, but in reality, she is giving him fuel. He heals his wounds while calmly copying the skill. Once he understands the principle, Luck reverses Drain, absorbs all of the demon god general's energy, and destroys her in front of her own shocked eyes. Thanks to this new skill, Luck declares that he can continue fighting for as many years as necessary, and time truly begins to pass. Weeks become months. He destroys wave after wave of demon gods, losing all sense of day and night. Even though Drain can restore his life force and magic power, Luck still needs sleep. Whenever exhaustion takes over, his reflexes slow down. To solve this, he casts Puppet Dance on his own body, programming it with preset movements so he can still attack, defend, and dodge even when his consciousness is asleep. And so, in the middle of the battlefield, there appears a man who can sleep while continuing to kill demon gods. His body keeps fighting while his mind briefly rests. This method keeps Luck alive, but his emotions gradually become numb. Every movement turns into a mechanical reflex. He admits that the only thing separating him from a machine is that he can still feel thirsty. After an uncountable amount of time, Luck stands among mountains of demon god corpses, like someone who has completed the most horrifying harvest in history. Just when Luck thinks he has finally cleared the battlefield, a massive black energy erupts from the pile of corpses. The entire rift begins to shake. The demon god king officially revives several years earlier than expected. Probably because too many demon gods were destroyed in one place, causing their energy to gather faster than predicted. In other words, Luck has worked so efficiently that he accidentally brings the final boss back ahead of schedule. The demon god king appears with the demon sword and immediately lands a deep slash on Luck. But after 10 years of continuous battle, Luck only steps back and calmly forms a magic circle. He casts Hellfire, drowning the enemy in flames, while also activating Drain, the very skill he learned from the demon god king's own subordinate. As a result, the demon god king revives only to be burned and drained at the same time, forced to suffer a brutal combination created from his own side's magic. In the end, the demon god king turns to ash. Luck also loses consciousness after using too much power. When he wakes up, he finds that his body has fully recovered thanks to the life force he absorbed. His clothes, however, are nearly gone, with only a few torn pieces barely covering him. Luck steps out of the rift and sees a peaceful green field. After so many years surrounded only by darkness and monster corpses, such ordinary scenery feels strangely unfamiliar. Unfortunately, Luck's appearance does not resemble a great hero who has just saved the world. His hair is messy, his clothes are torn, his adventurer card has burned away, and he has no money, luggage, or identification. When he reaches the royal capital's gate, the guards immediately stop him, mistaking him for a suspicious vagrant. Luckily, they still give him a cloak and a small bag so he can cover himself. Once he puts the cloak on, he looks less like a returning savior and more like a man who has just survived 10 years in the wilderness. The first thing Luck does is visit Goran's mansion. However, the guards refuse to let him in because he has no appointment. Luck tries to explain that he is an old friend of the owner, but that only makes them more suspicious. Meeting the Grand Guild Master of the Adventurer Guild requires registration, verification, and a proper schedule, and so the great hero who has just returned is stopped right in front of his best friend's home. With no other choice, Luck heads to the Adventurer Guild to remake his card. On the way, he suddenly sees a giant stone statue in the middle of the square. It depicts a young, handsome warrior with determined eyes, a noble posture, and an almost radiant, heroic presence. Luck stares at it for a while, unable to recognize who it is supposed to be. He asks an old man nearby and is shocked to learn that the statue is of him, the great hero Luck Franzen, who sacrificed his life inside the rift to save humanity. Only then does Luck realize that he has not been fighting for a few months or even a few years. He has lost a full decade. The entire world believes he is dead, while he is standing beside his own statue in a borrowed cloak. The most ironic part is that the statue is far too handsome. Its face is perfect, its hair flows dramatically, and its pose looks almost legendary. Meanwhile, the real Luck has messy hair, borrowed clothes, and the exhausted expression of someone who has not slept properly in 10 years. The difference between the legend and the real person is almost painful. Luck then continues to the Adventurer Guild headquarters and finally reunites with Goran. His old friend is now much older, with deeper lines on his face and a weathered beard. At first, Goran cannot believe what he is seeing, but once he hears Luck's familiar voice, he immediately pulls him into a hug and cries uncontrollably. For 10 years, Goran has carried the guilt of leaving Luck behind. Seeing the man everyone believed to be dead standing in front of him is more than he can handle. However, Luck quickly grabs the pastries on the table and starts eating them with desperate speed, turning the emotional reunion into an emergency meal scene within seconds. Luck explains that he has not eaten anything for the past 10 years. He survived only by absorbing energy from demon gods. Hearing this, Goran immediately takes the plate away and warns him that eating solid food after starving for so long could be dangerous. Even if Luck defeated the demon god king, he could still collapse from eating the wrong thing too quickly. So Goran orders someone to prepare thin porridge and warm water. The person who brings the porridge in is Eric, now dressed in royal clothing. The moment Eric sees Luck, he also breaks down in tears. But soon after, he notices something strange. Luck has not aged at all. In fact, he looks younger than before. Luck explains that this is because he absorbed an enormous amount of life force from the demon god king, which shocks Eric and Goran even more when they realize that he truly destroyed him. At present, the kingdom is still expanding its army in preparation for the demon god king's return. Yet the final enemy has already been defeated by Luck. He was simply too busy trying to find his way home to report it earlier. Eric confirms that he has become king. Goran is now the Grand Guild Master of the Adventurer Guild. As for Luck, he has been granted a long list of titles, including Great Sage, Savior, Great Archmage, and Grand Duke Luck Franzen. It sounds less like a normal title and more like a grand ceremonial introduction. Luck also asks why the statue outside is so unrealistically handsome. Eric and Goran admit that the sculptor had never met him in person, so the statue was made based only on their descriptions. Since both of them missed their old friend so much, they unconsciously exaggerated the details. That is how Luck ended up with a statue that looks far more polished than the real man. After discussing the situation, the three of them agree to let the world continue believing that Luck is dead. If people learn that he is alive, commoners, nobles, and foreign nations will all come after him. Luck only wants to return to being a free adventurer, so he changes his name to Luck Franzen and receives a special adventurer card. His true class, Great Archmage S rank, is hidden. On the surface, the card only shows Warrior F rank. It is a perfect disguise for someone who wants to move freely without attracting attention. Goran asks whether starting again from the lowest rank will bore him. Luck simply smiles and says that rank does not matter. As long as there are strong opponents to fight, that is enough. It is exactly the answer one would expect from someone who cares more about real combat than public titles. After that, the guard who stopped Luck outside the mansion bows and apologizes. Luck does not blame him because he understands that the guard was only doing his job. He then goes to the reception counter, meets Aron, and accepts a goblin extermination quest. When Aron sees Warrior F rank written on his card, she becomes worried. A newly registered rookie trying to hunt goblins alone is risky enough, and from her perspective, Luck looks exactly like someone who is underestimating the danger. At that moment, two young adventurers named Ario and Ginny appear. They are looking for someone to take the vanguard position, so they invite Luck to join their party. He agrees immediately, without asking for an interview or test, and the group soon heads toward the area where the goblins were seen. At the location with tracks, Ginny uses her tracking skill and judges that there are around 10 goblins. Luck silently acknowledges that her observation ability is fairly good, but with the experience of someone who once fought entire armies of demon gods, he quickly realizes that the real number is much higher. Some footprints have been deliberately erased or overlapped to mislead pursuers, something ordinary goblins should not be smart enough to do. Locke concludes that there must be a leader, or perhaps another force controlling them from behind. However, he does not say anything right away. He wants Ario and Ginny to experience what happens when their judgment is wrong and to learn how to respond when a plan fails. Of course, he also silently promises that he will step in if the situation becomes too dangerous and he will not let them die. The group enters an old mine. Locke takes the front, Ario uses fireball, and Ginny supports them with arrows. At first, the two cooperate quite well and defeat more than 30 goblins. But the monsters keep pouring out, and Ario quickly runs out of magic power while Ginny is left with only 3 arrows. Realizing that the situation has gone far beyond expectations, Ario immediately orders a retreat. That decision makes Locke quietly respect him more. A good leader is not someone who always tries to win at any cost, but someone who knows when to stop so everyone can return alive. For Ario and Ginny, the battle has already reached its limit. For Locke, however, it is still barely a warm-up. Just as the group is about to turn back, the ground begins to shake. A giant goblin lord carrying a spiked club appears and blocks the path. Locke observes how the goblins stole livestock, erased their tracks, and set up an ambush. He realizes that this monster does not seem intelligent enough to plan all of that, which only makes it clearer that something else is pulling the strings. Locke reaches toward his sword, ready to save Ario and Ginny, but at that exact moment, a figure dives down from above and strikes the Goblin Lord directly on the head. The newcomer then shouts that small fry should not get in the way. Her sudden arrival instantly changes the situation. The girl who just appeared immediately charges at the Goblin Lord, swinging her sword with absolute confidence. However, the moment her attack touches the monster's body, it bounces back as if she has struck a stone wall. The recoil numbs her arm, while the Goblin Lord is barely affected. From a distance, Ario sees how dangerous the situation has become and suggests that everyone retreat. Locke agrees and tells the siblings to be careful of goblins that may ambush them on the way out. But when the female warrior notices that Locke is still standing there instead of running, she becomes furious. She calls him small fry and tells him not to get in her way. It is a bold insult, but one she will soon regret. She attacks again, but the Goblin Lord swings its club with overwhelming force and shatters her sword. The monster raises its weapon to finish her off. Just when the female warrior is about to be crushed, Locke steps forward and blocks the heavy blow with one hand using his sword while it is still inside the sheath. Before she can understand what has happened, Locke draws his sword and slashes at incredible speed. The Goblin Lord's body is instantly cut into several pieces and collapses to the ground. Everything happens so quickly that the monster does not even have time to understand how it was defeated. After regaining her composure, the girl bows and thanks him. She introduces herself as Shia, daughter of Danton, the chief of the Eastern Beastkin clan. Shia is a B-rank warrior and also a vampire hunter. However, when Locke shows his adventurer card and calmly says that he is only an F-rank warrior, she immediately becomes both confused and deeply embarrassed. A B-rank warrior has just told an F-rank expert to run away. Locke does not tease her about it. Instead, he asks about the thing hiding deeper inside the cave, because he can sense an aura far more dangerous than the Goblin Lord. Shia admits that the enemy inside is a vampire lord. This confirms Locke's suspicion that some force is controlling the goblins from behind. The vampire lord not only has extremely powerful life force, but can also turn into mist or split into a swarm of bats to avoid attacks. Locke advises Shia to leave, but she firmly refuses. Shia explains that her clan has hunted vampires for generations. Not long ago, they cornered this very vampire lord, but her father, Chief Danton, was seriously wounded. The vampire lord used that chance to escape. To Shia, allowing that prey to escape is a disgrace to her entire clan. That is why she has spent months tracking him alone, determined to restore her clan's honor with her own hands. Seeing that Shia's sword is broken, Locke calmly hands her his own weapon and spreads his hands, showing that he can fight barehanded. Shia misunderstands his intention and believes that he is lending her the sword so she can personally defeat the vampire lord and restore her clan's pride. She looks at Locke with deep gratitude as if he has understood her wish completely. Meanwhile, Locke is simply thinking that someone without a sword should borrow one. It is a small misunderstanding, but a surprisingly charming one. After clearing out the remaining goblins, Shia becomes even more impressed by Locke's barehanded combat ability. Locke explains that his original class was Mage, and that he used to support Eric and Goran from the rear. However, being trapped alone inside the rift for 10 years forced Locke to learn every possible fighting method. From a pure mage, he gradually became an all-purpose fighter who could cast spells, use a sword, and fight barehanded. The two move deeper into the cave and enter a massive chamber filled with skulls and bones from countless victims. From above, the vampire lord finally reveals himself, with large bat wings and a confident presence. He looks exactly like a boss waiting for challengers to enter his chamber. The moment Shia sees him, she loses her calm. Holding Locke's sword, she charges forward and declares that she will defeat him herself. But the vampire lord only laughs. He mocks her by saying that even her father barely managed to leave a tiny scratch on him, and that she has no right to threaten him. Locke quickly sees through the entire plan. The goblins stealing livestock and leaving traces behind were all part of a trap created by the vampire lord. He lured adventurers into the cave, waited until the goblins exhausted them, and then appeared to turn them into food. The Vampire Lord immediately creates a magic circle and casts charm on Locke. He plans to turn Locke into a puppet, then force Shia to choose between killing herself or being killed by the new ally she has just met. It is a cruel plan designed not only to kill her, but also to humiliate the daughter of the man who once hunted him. Unfortunately for him, he has chosen the wrong opponent. Charm has absolutely no effect on Locke. The mental magic is completely erased the moment it touches his consciousness. Before the Vampire Lord can understand why his spell failed, Locke rushes forward and punches him straight in the face, knocking out several teeth. Locke calmly explains that his resistance to mental effects is extremely high. Then he mocks the Vampire Lord, saying that a true Lord of Vampires should not have magic this weak, and that the enemy before him may only be a low-class vampire pretending to be important. Those words strike the Vampire Lord's pride directly. He goes mad with rage and attacks, but every strike is easily dodged by Locke. After observing him for a short while, Locke activates Drain. Energy surrounds the enemy's body and begins forcibly pulling out his life force. The Vampire Lord panics and struggles to escape. Meanwhile, Locke casually introduces himself as an F-rank adventurer, making the situation even more humiliating for the enemy. A monster who claimed to stand above others is now being drained by someone officially registered as a beginner. In desperation, the Vampire Lord disperses his magic into a massive swarm of black bats and sends them rushing toward Locke, but Shia immediately charges in, using the sword Locke lent her to cut down the entire swarm. Locke drains the enemy's life force while Shia blocks every possible counterattack. The Vampire Lord's body gradually turns to ash. He realizes in terror that even his regeneration has been sealed. Before collapsing completely, he mutters about a mysterious metal. Shia returns the sword to Locke and is shocked to sense a terrifying power from the blade, something she has never felt from any weapon before. Locke quickly laughs it off and claims that Shia is probably imagining things. He says the sword is just something he bought at a flea market. But in truth, this is the demon sword of the demon god king, a final boss level weapon that he casually obtained after defeating its owner. From the pile of ashes, Shia picks up a cursed metal. She explains that this item has gathered curses from stolen blood and stolen lives over many centuries. Locke grows serious, because during his 10 years of fighting, he never saw any demon god use anything like it. Even though his body has crumbled, the Vampire Lord's remaining head continues speaking. He reveals that the metal's power will soon open a gate to the dimensional rift, where countless demon gods are waiting. After that, the dark gods will descend and drown the human world in disaster. Hearing the words dimensional rift, Locke immediately remembers the hell that trapped him for an entire decade. He also understands why Eric and Goran could not return to save him back then. The gate cannot be opened from the human world side. If the Vampire Lord's words are true, then some force is trying to break that rule. Locke cuts the metal in half to stop the plan, but the item immediately explodes and releases a torrent of black energy. Before Shia can react, Locke draws the demon sword. The blade begins to tremble and actively absorbs every trace of the curse. The immediate danger is resolved. At the same time, Locke realizes that the demon sword is not only a weapon for killing, it can also absorb cursed power, which may make it extremely useful in the battles ahead. Before disappearing completely, the Vampire Lord realizes in horror that the man standing before him is the legendary Great Sage Luck. He shouts Locke's true name. Locke calmly cuts down the remaining head and ends the fight. Shia immediately connects all the clues: the impossible strength, the demon sword, and the final confirmation from the Vampire Lord. She finally understands that the F-rank adventurer before her is actually the savior worshipped by the entire kingdom. Shia swears to protect his secret with her life. Locke only shrugs and tells her there is no need to be so serious. Besides, he says, he does not look anything like the overly handsome statue in the square. After returning to the royal capital, receptionist Aron repeatedly apologizes for the mistake in the quest evaluation. The original report mentioned only a small group of goblins, but in reality, there was a goblin lord and a vampire lord hiding inside. Without Locke and Shia, the young adventurers could easily have become food. Ario and Ginny still do not know Locke's true identity. They innocently believe that Shia defeated all the monsters, so they keep thanking her. The irony becomes even stronger when the two of them turn toward the stone statue of the great hero Luck, clasp their hands, and pray in gratitude to the savior for protecting them. Meanwhile, the real Luck is alive and standing less than 3 meters away. Locke can only smile awkwardly as people worship his statue like a guardian deity, while the real person quietly walks by with an F-rank card in his hand. At night, Locke asks Shia to continue gathering information about vampire movements. She happily agrees. Locke says that the peace he sacrificed 10 years to protect will not be destroyed so easily. Whether the force behind this is the demon gods or the dark gods, he will find a way to stop them. Shia gives Locke half of the cursed metal so he can take it back for investigation. After that, he goes to Goran's mansion to report. The moment the Grand Guildmaster sees his old friend, he explodes in anger because Locke said he would only be gone for a short while, yet disappeared for 3 whole days without sending a single message. Locke apologizes and shows him the half medal. He explains that the demon gods and the demon god king may have only been the advanced force of a greater power called the dark gods. Their goal is to open the dimensional rift from the human world side. Goran immediately sets aside his anger and focuses on the metal. He realizes that its material is extremely strange. It is not gold, or orichalcum, or mithril. Even with his many years of experience as Grand Guildmaster, he cannot identify its origin, so he decides to bring it to the alchemists for examination. Once official matters are done, Goran turns to a personal issue with the expression of a helpless father. He explains that his daughter, Chalice, is now 15 years old. The very child he once feared would not recognize him after he spent so long inside the rift. Chalice currently has strength around B rank, even though her official rank is still low. She inherited great power from her father, but lacks observation skills and caution. Goran worries that her impulsive personality will put her in danger, so he opposes her becoming an adventurer. As a result, father and daughter have fallen into a cold war. Chalice refuses to give up the path she has chosen, and the more Goran tries to stop her, the more she wants to prove herself. Outside, he manages thousands of adventures. At home, he is still just a father who does not know how to handle his teenage daughter. Goran asks Locke to secretly follow and protect Chalice. As soon as Locke hears this, he looks out the window and sees the girl standing in the yard. Chalice immediately glares at him, as if the strange man who suddenly appeared in her house has already become her enemy. A little later, while Locke is calmly eating, Chalice enters the room with the seriousness of someone preparing to investigate a mystery. She keeps looking at him, then at Goran, wanting to ask something but hesitating again and again. Locke has no idea that inside her head, she has already built an entire family drama. Finally, Chalice suddenly points straight at Locke and boldly announces the theory that freezes the entire dining table. "You are my father's illegitimate son, aren't you?" That question immediately drags Locke into a family misunderstanding he never asked for. Chalice looks at his young appearance, Goran's familiar attitude toward him, and the fact that he appeared so suddenly. Then she connects every detail into the conclusion that makes the most sense to her imagination. If Goran hears this, he will probably laugh and cry at the same time. The daughter he once feared might forget his face, not only recognizes him clearly, but has also somehow turned humanity's savior into her secret half-brother. And with that, a new family misunderstanding begins. Locke immediately denies being Goran's secret son, but to Chalice, his obvious discomfort is practically a confession. After surviving 10 years inside the spatial rift, he never imagined that his first serious challenge upon returning to civilization would be proving that he was not the illegitimate child of his closest friend. Chalice calmly raises 3 fingers and begins presenting her evidence like a detective who has already solved the case. First, Goran only brought Locke home while his wife was away. Second, Goran became noticeably happier after Locke arrived. Third, during the 3 days Locke spent away on a mission, Goran was so worried that he could not focus on reading and repeatedly cleaned the house just to calm himself down. According to Chalice, her father is terrible at hiding his emotions. The more he tries to behave normally, the more suspicious he becomes. Locke can only sit in silence. Every detail in her analysis is correct, yet the conclusion has somehow fallen into another dimension. He begins imagining Goran's entire household collapsing simply because he needed a place to stay. Meanwhile, the butler directs a heavy stare toward him, silently delivering a very clear message. "You caused this situation so you can solve it yourself." With no better option, Locke explains that he and Goran are longtime companions who spent years fighting together far from home. That is why Goran became anxious when he suddenly lost contact with him. Locke also emphasizes that his real age is far greater than his youthful appearance suggests, making it impossible for him to be Goran's son. Chalice becomes silent for several seconds, nodding as though she has finally understood everything. Then she delivers an even more devastating conclusion. If he is not her father's son, perhaps he is her older brother. Locke immediately denies it. Chalice adjusts the theory again and decides he must be her younger brother instead, even inviting him to start calling her Big Sister. At this point, she appears capable of creating an entire family tree from nothing. Desperate, Locke places a adventurer card on the table and points to the name written clearly across it, Locke Franzen. Goran's family name is Morton. He assumes this undeniable evidence will finally end the investigation. Chalice merely concludes that her father must not have officially acknowledged him yet. She reassures Locke that none of this is his fault and promises to force Goran to confess everything so that her mother can deal with him personally. Locke begins sweating. This misunderstanding is now only a few steps away from destroying a perfectly innocent marriage. The false identity card created to protect his secret has somehow become evidence against him. When every ordinary explanation fails, Locke finally asks whether Chalice can keep a secret important enough to shake the entire kingdom. After she agrees, he removes the disguise placed upon his adventurer card. The false information disappears, revealing the name Locke Franzen and a collection of overwhelming titles: Great Sage, Savior of Humanity, Grand Magician, and Grand Duke. Locke admits that he is the hero believed to have died inside the spatial rift and that he returned only a few days earlier. Chellis freezes when she realizes that the man sitting in front of her is the legendary figure whose statue stands in the royal capital. Even this truth cannot immediately stop her imagination. She remembers the statue in the city square and finally understands how far her investigation wandered from reality. The confident young detective instantly disappears. Chellis drops to her knees and apologizes desperately to the great hero Locke. Locke does not blame her. He simply asks her to keep his survival secret because once the truth becomes public, countless political and personal complications will follow. The interrogation helps Locke understand why Goran worries so much about his daughter. Chellis possesses strong convictions, but she often reaches a conclusion too early and then rearranges every piece of evidence to defend it. For an adventurer, that habit could cause her to misjudge an enemy and charge into danger before properly understanding the situation. At the same time, Locke can see the determination beneath her impulsive personality. Rather than forbid her from adventuring, he decides to accompany her on an E-rank mission. She is already registered with the guild, and if he refuses to help, she will probably search for trouble on her own. The safest solution is to let her begin her first adventure under the supervision of someone powerful enough to protect her. On the road toward a village near the forest, Chellis can barely contain her excitement. This is the first time she has left the city as an official adventurer, and the peaceful countryside makes the assignment feel more like a pleasant excursion than a real mission. Once they reach the village, however, the reports become increasingly strange. Different villagers claim to have seen monsters with completely different appearances. One person describes a creature with several heads, while another insists that an enormous beast wandered through the area. Despite these frightening stories, no one has been attacked. No houses have been damaged and not a single animal has disappeared. Chellis points out that if monsters as powerful as the villagers describe were truly roaming this close to the royal capital, the mission would never have been classified as E-rank. Locke agrees. The guild probably examined the lack of injuries and property damage and concluded that the reported creatures did not actually exist. Even so, the two follow the request and travel to the exact coordinates listed in the mission. At first, the land before them appears completely empty. Then the ground begins shaking violently. Dust rises in enormous circles and a gigantic red dragon suddenly appears directly in front of them. Its size and thunderous roar shake the surrounding forest. Chellis briefly trembles, but the fear is quickly replaced by excitement as her desire to fight takes over. While Chellis draws her sword and prepares to attack, Locke notices several important details. The dragon has no smell, produces no body heat, and carries none of the presence of a living creature. He immediately understands that it is an illusion. However, this is no ordinary spell designed only to deceive the eyes. The dragon is constructed from mana so densely compressed that it can produce sound, possess weight, and create genuine physical impact. Rather than destroying it immediately, Locke allows Chellis to fight in her own way. She charges forward, avoids a sweeping claw, and repeatedly strikes the creature's legs and body. Sparks fly from every impact, convincing her that she is attacking a living monster with extraordinarily durable scales. As Locke observes, he confirms that Chellis truly possesses the physical ability and swordsmanship of a B-rank adventurer. Goran's assessment of his daughter was not biased. Unfortunately, Chellis focuses entirely on the enemy in front of her. She fails to notice that her attacks only disturb the mass of mana and do nothing to harm the person controlling it. The dragon gradually pushes her into a disadvantageous position. Only then does Locke step forward. He places one hand against the enormous illusion, analyzes the flow of mana, and activates Drain. Every trace of magical energy is immediately absorbed. The gigantic dragon breaks apart into streams of light and disappears before Chellis's eyes. Chellis drops onto the ground and checks her body, only then realizing that she has not been injured. When Locke confirms that the dragon was an illusion, she angrily asks why he did not tell her sooner. Locke uses the battle to explain her most dangerous weakness. When facing an illusion capable of physical interaction, continuing to attack it directly only wastes stamina. The correct response is to locate the caster and disable them. If the enemy's position cannot be identified, retreating before the trap becomes more dangerous is the smartest choice. Chellis stubbornly argues that she dislikes the idea of running away. Locke answers coldly that staying alive is still better than dying because of pride. The reality behind those words leaves her with no effective response. After finishing the lesson, Locke turns toward the forest and calls out to the person hiding nearby. He realized from the beginning that whoever created the illusions never intended to hurt anyone. The false monsters were designed only to frighten strangers away. Lines of light surrounding the trees slowly fade, and a small girl wearing a purple cloak steps into view. Locke quietly praises her ability to conceal her presence, which was nearly perfect. The girl becomes nervous and introduces herself as Lucira, a member of the demon race. Chellis immediately leans toward Locke and whispers a question. Are demons not supposed to be cruel and evil? Locke gently corrects her. Demons often possess powerful magic and strong bodies, but strength has nothing to do with whether someone is good or wicked. Lucira asks why Locke would trust a demon who just used an illusion to block his path. He explains that she never injured the villagers and avoided using lethal attacks against either of them. Lucira also understands that her magic is completely ineffective against the man before her. Locke is strong enough to overpower her and force out the truth, yet he chooses to sit down and speak peacefully. That decision convinces her to trust him. Lucira agrees to show them what she has been protecting, leading the two deeper into the mountains toward an ancient temple constructed during the Age of the Gods. Inside the deepest chamber, Lucira happily announces that she's returned to Lord Gerberga. Locke and Chellis follow her gaze and discover a round white creature resting comfortably in a nest of straw. It looks exactly like an unusually large but otherwise completely ordinary chicken. Chellis blurts out the obvious question, is that not simply a chicken? Lucira immediately becomes defensive and insists that Gerberga is the divine being worshipped by her tribe for generations. She admits that he is technically still a chicken, but he is a chicken possessing sacred power. According to Lucira, Gerberga's ancestors once awakened the world with their crowing. That power established the boundary between day and night and also affected the barriers separating different worlds. Because of this, Gerberga can open and close gateways connected to other dimensions. Locke immediately focuses on the most important possibility. Could that power seal the spatial rift? Lucira confirms that it can. The answer is brief, but it completely changes the situation. If the gateway beyond the rift opens, countless demon gods may invade their world. Gerberga is the only living key capable of preventing that catastrophe. Locke finally understands why the vampires have been desperately hunting a creature that appears completely harmless. If Gerberga is eliminated, the greatest obstacle preventing the rift from opening will disappear. Lucira continues her story in a quiet voice. Her tribe once lived peacefully in the northern mountains. Then the vampires arrived without warning and slaughtered the entire village. Lucira was the only survivor. Before dying, the tribal chief entrusted Gerberga to her and ordered her to flee to this ancient temple, which was believed to contain a barrier capable of stopping vampires. Lucira carried Gerberga through the dark forest, bearing both the responsibility and the final hopes of her people. Even after reaching the temple, however, the pursuers continued to appear. Locke examines the surrounding structure and confirms a terrible truth. No protective barrier currently exists here. Either the chief's information was wrong or the protection vanished long ago. What matters is that Lucira can no longer rely on the temple for safety. Locke offers to take both her and Gerberga to the royal capital and protect them himself. For Lucira, however, entrusting the god her entire tribe died protecting to an adventurer she only just met is an impossibly serious decision. To give her a reason to believe him, Locke draws the demon sword once wielded by the demon god king and drives it into the stone floor. He calmly explains that there is only one reason such a weapon could be in his possession. He personally defeated its former master. Lucira stares in disbelief as she realizes that the man before her is not a low-ranked adventurer at all. He is the great sage Luck, the legendary savior honored throughout the world. Chellis quietly confirms that Luck survived the spatial rift and has finally returned. Luck kneels until he is at eye level with the frightened girl. Using his true name, he swears that he will protect the divine rooster Gerberga even at the cost of his own life. In Lucira's memories, the villagers never viewed protecting their god as an unwanted burden. It was the greatest pride of their people. Now the legendary hero himself is acknowledging that their sacrifice was not meaningless. Lucira clutches Gerberga tightly and begins to cry. Throughout her desperate escape, she could do nothing except continue obeying the final command given to her. Luck's promise finally gives her someone trustworthy enough to share the responsibility she is carried alone. By the time the group leaves the temple, evening is approaching. Chellis immediately begins discussing the possibility of keeping Gerberga at home as a pet, earning fierce protests from Lucira. Their argument has barely started when a group of vampires descends from the sky and blocks the path ahead. One of the vampires demands Locke's identity. He coldly replies that creatures as insignificant as them are not worthy of knowing his name. After confirming that their targets are Lucira and Gerberga, Locke wastes no more time. He casts a wide-area magic arrow rain, sending countless beams of light through the enemy formation. The surviving vampires are forced to transform in order to escape. Their bodies separate into swarms of bats, an extremely troublesome ability because even a small group of bats can survive and later reconstruct the original body. At the exact moment the vampires become trapped between their humanoid forms and their swarms of bats, Gerberga pokes his head out from beneath Lucira's cloak and lets out a powerful crow. Divine energy instantly establishes a forced boundary. The incomplete state between two different forms is no longer permitted to exist. Every bat freezes in the middle of transformation and turns to ash within seconds. Lucira explains that Gerberga's ability works only at the precise moment an enemy is changing states. He cannot destroy vampires whenever he chooses. However, because transforming into bats is their most common method of escape, this power makes the divine rooster one of their deadliest natural. When the group returns to the royal capital after nightfall, Shia is already waiting. She complains that Locke kept her waiting far too long, then immediately delivers urgent information. The recent enemies are no longer operating as isolated individuals. Vampire forces have begun gathering and preparing operations on a much larger scale. According to the intelligence she collected, the being standing above the other vampire lords is a great lord known as the King of Kings. Far away in the darkness, countless pairs of red eyes open beneath an ancient fortress. Above them stands the enormous silhouette of a figure with vast wings. Its identity and specific objective remain unknown, but the attack against Gerberga was clearly not an isolated event. Luck has finally discovered the key capable of sealing the spatial rift, and at the same time, the vampires have begun assembling beneath a leader more powerful than any enemy he has encountered since returning. The moment Shia returns, she brings Locke a deeply troubling report. The vampire gathering the enemy forces is not an ordinary lord, but a grand lord whose power is considered comparable to that of a demon god. The beastmen have devoted all available resources to the investigation, but Shia's father has still not recovered from his injuries. As a result, she must attend the meeting between the tribal chiefs in his place. Unfortunately, the faction demanding immediate war holds the majority. They want to mobilize their warriors and begin the hunt despite knowing neither the Grand Lord's exact location nor the full extent of its abilities. Fearing that her people will be wiped out in a reckless attack, Shia comes to Locke and asks him to help eliminate the Grand Lord before the rushed expedition turns into a disaster. Locke has barely understood the main problem when Shia reveals that an even more urgent issue remains. The vampires are desperately searching for one very special chicken. At that point, Locke is no longer certain whether they should continue discussing the fate of the world or start heating a cooking pot. Shia found the story equally difficult to believe at first. However, the chicken's crow can interfere with the boundaries of space, close the gateway connected to the rift, and trap vampires at the exact moment they transform. Locke immediately realizes that the chicken in question is the divine rooster Gerberga. Better still, they do not need to search for him because Lucira is currently holding the sacred bird inside the mansion. Just as Locke calls everyone into the room, the door opens and Chalice, who has been listening from outside, loses her balance and falls directly inside. She hurriedly denies spying on them, but Lucira calmly confirms that she already advised Chalice not to eavesdrop. With her escape route completely destroyed, Chalice can only lower her head and apologize. Shia makes Chalice promise to keep everything secret before meeting Lucira and Gerberga. She freezes when she sees such an important target resting peacefully like an ordinary chicken, but quickly bows with complete respect. Shia has personally witnessed Gerberga's crow trapping vampires in the middle of their transformation and reducing them to ash. The group spreads out a map and begins planning the Grand Lord hunt. The beastmen have narrowed the search to several mountainous regions, each guarded by large numbers of vampires. The moment Chalice hears that a battle is coming, she immediately asks to accompany Locke and Shia. Locke refuses. Shia is a B-rank adventurer and is required by the laws of her tribe to participate. Chalice, on the other hand, has no reason to enter a hunt that lies far beyond her current rank. Instead, Locke assigns Chalice to remain in the royal capital and protect Gerberga and Lucira. The city's barrier makes it difficult for Lord-class vampires to enter, but it cannot guarantee perfect safety. Once Locke and Shia leave, the enemy may change its target and attack the Divine Rooster directly. Chalice initially looks disappointed, but the moment Locke says he needs an elite adventurer to serve as their bodyguard, her eyes light up and she accepts the mission enthusiastically. Goran returns at that moment, and Shia finally learns that Chalice is the daughter of the Adventurers Guild's Grandmaster. Goran nearly calls his old friend Luck before hurriedly correcting the name to Locke. He then thanks him for looking after Chalice. When Locke describes his daughter as a fairly capable warrior, Goran's expression immediately fills with pride. Chalice unexpectedly bows and apologizes to her father for the way she behaved before. Hearing her call him father nearly moves Goran to tears. He assures her that he never held it against her, but when he asks what made her so angry in the first place, Chalice admits that his opposition to her adventuring career was only part of the reason. The greater problem was that she believed Goran had a secret child and mistakenly assumed Locke was her long-lost older brother. Goran is drinking water at the time and immediately sprays it everywhere. Their emotional reconciliation transforms into a family crisis within seconds. Chalice happily leaves the room, abandoning Goran to hold his head over his daughter's remarkable ability to combine correct information into a completely incorrect conclusion. He lowers his head and asks Locke to continue watching over her. Chalice is powerful, but she is also painfully innocent and often reaches a conclusion before gathering enough evidence. Locke reminds him that Goran behaved just as recklessly when they were young, forcing both him and Eric to clean up one disaster after another. Even so, Goran remains deeply worried about his daughter's life as an adventurer. He wants to forbid Chalice from accepting more missions because she tends to charge first, and remember afterward that she only has one life. Locke understands the fear behind his words and agrees to supervise her. If Chalice attempts anything beyond her abilities, he will stop her immediately. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Goran pulls his old friend into a tight embrace. Unfortunately, his beard stabs directly into Locke's face, turning what should have been an emotional moment into a surprisingly painful experience. At that exact moment, Chalice opens the door. She finds her father crying while embracing Locke, and her imagination instantly fills the entire room with romantic roses. Blushing, she tells them to continue without worrying about her and quickly closes the door again. A completely new misunderstanding is born. Nearly an hour of explanations is required before Chalice finally kneels and apologizes, while Locke and Goran look as exhausted as though they have just survived a major battle. Once everyone finally returns to the actual problem, Goran concludes that the appearance of a Grand Lord has transformed the incident into a national-level threat. Chalice suggests using Gerberga's power, but Lucira explains that the Divine Rooster cannot simply burn every vampire at will. His ability is especially effective only during the brief moment when a vampire changes between human form and a swarm of bats. Locke is even more opposed to bringing Gerberga onto the battlefield. Fighting while protecting the single most important target would already be dangerously difficult. Shia then adds another disturbing detail. If the Grand Lord drinks the Divine Rooster's blood, the act of violating a sacred creature will generate an enormous quantity of cursed energy. The cursed medallion could instantly gather enough power to open the spatial gate. Bringing Gerberga along would be equivalent to personally handing the enemy the key to the rift. Goran immediately suggests placing Gerberga under Eric's protection inside the royal palace. The king was once a hero, and the palace possesses the strongest defensive forces in the capital. The group is quickly escorted there. Along the way, Shia and Lucira notice that nearly all the servants are extremely young. Goran explains that Eric is currently training approximately 2,000 students, including apprentice knights, apprentice attendants, and even apprentice chefs. Most of them are younger children from impoverished noble families or the sons and daughters of knights who died in battle. The palace provides them with food, accommodation, professional training, and assistance finding employment afterward. Locke is deeply impressed. Eric did not merely ascend the throne, he also uses education to give those abandoned by war a future. Eric appears with his daughters, Charlotte and Marie. Having heard that Locke recently eliminated a vampire lord, he brings the girls to greet his old friend. Charlotte politely addresses him by the title Grand Duke Franzen, but Locke simply tells them to call him Uncle Luck. Marie excitedly raises a copy of The Adventures of Hero Luck and asks for an autograph. The actual hero only now discovers that he has become a children's icon throughout the kingdom. Shia explains that nearly every child in the kingdom grows up hearing stories about Hero Luck. Goran adds that theatrical productions about him are always sold out. The real hero is sitting inside the palace while audiences outside continue paying to watch actors pretend to be him. Chalice reveals that even Gerberga enjoys listening to illustrated stories about Luck. Marie asks permission to pet the rooster, Charlotte quickly joins her, and the living key to the world's survival is soon reduced to the role of royal pet for two princesses. Goran asks Chalice to take Charlotte, Marie, and Gerberga into the neighboring room. Once the door closes, the atmosphere gradually becomes serious again. Eric admits that he knows Luck is dealing with an urgent crisis, but he still wanted his daughters to meet the man who saved their family at least once. 10 years earlier, Luck remained behind alone to stop the demon god army. Because of that sacrifice, Eric survived, returned home, and lived long enough to witness Charlotte and Marie being born. To Eric, his daughters are the most precious treasures in the world. His greatest happiness is simply being allowed to live beside them, and Luck gave him the opportunity to experience that life. Goran adds that because their friend remained behind inside the rift, he was able to watch Chalice grow into the young woman she is today. Luck awkwardly tells them that such formal gratitude is unnecessary, but Eric wants him to understand that these feelings belong to far more than two old companions. From the citizens of the kingdom to every living person across the continent, all of them now enjoy a peace purchased with Luck's 10 years of isolation. Believing he had died, they could only pray before a stone statue. Eric and Goran are fortunate enough to thank the real person standing before them. The laughter of Charlotte, Marie, and Chalice coming from the next room is the clearest possible evidence of what Luck's decision truly accomplished. After the silence passes, Locke asks about Levi. Eric explains that she also wishes to meet him, but she currently commands the nation's holy magic order and must remain stationed at the Grand Cathedral. Locke promises to visit her another time before returning to the immediate crisis. The vampires intend to open a spatial gateway and summon the Dark God. Gerberga's divine power can also eliminate the cursed energy they have already accumulated. For that reason, the vampires want both to remove this obstacle and to exploit the curse generated by drinking the blood of a sacred being. Eric formally accepts responsibility for protecting Lucira and the Divine Rooster inside the palace. Lucira confidently entrusts both her own safety and Gerberga's to him. With the defensive line established, Locke believes the group can focus entirely on eliminating the Grand Lord. He and Shia intend to gather the Beastmen hunters, lure the ordinary vampire lords away from their leader, and then attack once the protective formation develops an opening. Goran immediately points out that the roles should be reversed. The Grand Lord is the most dangerous target, but the Beastmen forces may not possess enough strength to finish it. Shia explains that although the hunters may be unable to kill the ordinary lords, they can hold them in place. The only person capable of eliminating the Grand Lord is Luck. Therefore, the beastmen will delay the lords while he strikes directly at the enemy's command center. Goran worries that the strategy could cause devastating casualties among Shia's tribe. She refuses to retreat. If the Grand Lord escapes, the massacres will continue, and the risk of opening the rift will remain. Shia would rather accept the danger now than allow the enemy to continue harming innocent people. Goran proposes mobilizing additional members of the Adventurers Guild, but Locke warns him about the vampire's charm ability. Beastmen possess relatively strong resistance, while humans are far more easily controlled and may turn their weapons against their own companions. Someone whose blood has been drained shows visible symptoms, but a person affected only by charm can appear completely normal. Sending a large human force may simply cause the soldiers to slaughter one another from within. While the adults discuss preventing betrayal inside their own forces, Kellis plays with the two princesses and Gerberga in the neighboring room. She remembers Locke's praise but suspects that calling her elite was merely an attempt to comfort her. She is still only an F-rank adventurer. During the previous battle, even the illusion of a red dragon overwhelmed her. If she insisted on following Luck against the Grand Lord, she might become nothing more than an obstacle. For the first time, Chellis does not rush in and demand to participate. She accepts the responsibility of remaining behind to protect Charlotte, Marie, and Gerberga. Her defeat against the illusion taught her that strength cannot replace careful observation or an honest understanding of one's limitations. However, while the two princesses are still chasing the divine rooster around the room, a magical plate on the table suddenly begins glowing purple. A spell circle appears beneath it and releases a stream of black smoke. Chellis immediately senses danger and orders both girls to leave the room, but the door has already been locked. The smoke rapidly gathers into human shapes, and three winged vampires appear inside. Chellis has no sword. Behind her stand only the two princesses and Gerberga. For one brief moment, she wonders whether she can possibly win. Then she rejects the question entirely. This is a battle she has no choice but to fight. There are no proper weapons in the room, but a large metal candlestick remains available. Chellis tears it from the floor and places herself between the children and the intruders. She draws an imaginary boundary and declares that no vampire will be allowed to cross it. Her objective is not to defeat them. She only needs to keep them on the opposite side and protect everyone behind her. The first vampire charges. Chellis shifts aside, avoids the lunge, and slams the candlestick into his body. The other two attempt to activate charm through their glowing red eyes. Remembering Locke's warning, she immediately covers her eyes with one arm, deliberately sacrificing her vision to avoid eye contact. Chellis must now rely entirely on sound and changes in the air to maintain the distance. The metal prongs pierce one vampire's chest and injure him, but the attack is not enough to destroy him. Chellis spins the candlestick like a spear, repeatedly deflecting their claws and forcing them away from the two princesses. She briefly turns to reassure the girls that she is still all right. The three vampires quickly change their approach and attack together. The candlestick is shattered, but Chellis grips the two broken sections and continues blocking without abandoning her position. Chellis cannot finish them, and her strength gradually approaches its limit. However, she is no longer the girl who blindly charges at an enemy and waits for someone else to rescue her. She understands that what truly matters is behind her, and that she cannot leave her position merely to exchange one more attack. When all three vampires strike at once, Chellis retreats, embraces the princesses, and uses her own body as a shield against the final assault. At that exact moment, a beam of light sweeps across the room and blocks every attack. Locke appears behind Chellis and calmly tells her that she performed exceptionally well. His recognition comes only after she learns to observe, restrain herself, and place the safety of others above her pride. He officially calls Chellis his disciple and tells her to leave the rest to her teacher. The three vampires have not yet been destroyed, but from the moment Locke enters the room, the assassination attempt is already over. Chellis did not defeat the enemy, but she protected Charlotte, Marie, and Gerberga until help arrived. She also proved that Luck's lesson had not been wasted. The three intruders must now face the man who once destroyed an entire demon god army by himself. Locke steps forward to take his student's place. All three vampires activate charm at the same time, an ability capable of turning allies against one another. But the red light disappears almost as soon as it appears. The mind of a man who survived 10 years inside the rift cannot be shaken so easily. Locke calmly declares that their mind control is useless and forms a sphere of magic around all three enemies. Inside it, the temperature, pressure, and crushing force rise simultaneously. The vampires panic and attempt to scatter into bats, but the sphere leaves them no space in which to transform. Locke closes his hand, compressing the dark sphere into a single point and destroying all three at once. The spell keeps its destructive force contained within a narrow area, leaving Chellis and the two princesses unharmed. One vampire recognizes him only a moment before the end as the great sage Luck Franzen. Charlotte and Marie can only stare as the legendary hero from their stories appears before them and defeats all three enemies in seconds. Eric and Goran rush into the room. Charlotte and Marie embrace their father and explain that Chellis protected them. Eric sincerely thanks her, but Chellis lowers her head because she failed to defeat the attackers. Locke reminds her that her mission was not to eliminate the enemy. It was to keep both princesses safe until reinforcements arrived. Chellis placed herself between them and the vampires and never allowed anyone to pass. By that standard, she won. Locke is not merely comforting her. Had Chalice abandoned her position for the sake of landing one attack, either Charlotte or Marie could have been captured. Her restraint is precisely what allowed her to complete the mission. Chalice finally understands that successfully protecting someone is also a victory. Lucira runs over and embraces Gerberga, but the silver tray on the table suddenly begins glowing. An eye-shaped magic circle appears across its surface. Locke recognizes it as the point the three vampires used to infiltrate the palace, and two more enemies are already approaching from the other side. Rather than destroying the portal immediately, Locke asks Lucira to disguise him as the 8th rank lord. The two servants who emerge from the circle immediately kneel before him. They report that the 3 agents sent earlier stopped responding, so the 6th rank lord ordered them to investigate. From their behavior, Locke realizes that a lower number represents a higher position among the vampire lords. He pretends that he personally punished the first group for disrespecting him, then accuses the 6th rank of interfering with the mission to capture the divine rooster assigned by their great lord. Terrified, the two servants explain that the 6th rank also claims to have received direct orders from their king. He controls numerous human agents, including several who have already infiltrated the royal palace. By deliberately placing the two supposedly conflicting orders beside each other, Locke manipulates them into revealing the tension inside their own organization. He then confirms that the magic circle on the tray can transport him directly to the 6th rank's location. Once he has obtained enough information, Locke removes the illusion and eliminates both servants. The tray was originally carried into the room by the maid Loanna, but that does not prove she betrayed them. The palace barrier prevents anyone from constructing a magic circle directly inside, but a completed spell attached to an ordinary object can still be carried through. Loanna may be an agent, or she may simply be another victim of charm. Locke orders Shia and Chalice to locate her. Eric will take the princesses to safety, while Goran protects Lucira and Gerberga. Locke will use the portal to attack the 6th rank's headquarters directly. Before stepping through, he tells everyone to destroy the gate immediately so the enemy cannot use it to return to the palace. The other side is a dark stone fortress. The magic circle still glows above Locke as guards pour from the corridors and surround him. Several magical eyes near the throne immediately fire purple beams at the intruder, shooting straight through the servants standing in their path. Some are destroyed by their own master's attack, while others are forced to transform into bats to escape the explosion. Locke blocks the beams with his demon sword and steps calmly from the smoke. He is not surprised by the attack, only disgusted by a commander willing to use his own followers as disposable shields. The 6th rank lord descends from the throne and calls Locke a monster. Locke replies that he has no interest in hearing that accusation from someone who treats his servants' lives as worthless. The two charge and exchange sword strikes. The 6th rank manages to block the Demon King's demon sword and demands that Locke surrender the weapon. Locke tells him to take it himself if he wants it. The vampire is quickly overwhelmed. Before delivering the final blow, Locke asks how their organization bypassed the palace defenses. The 6th rank refuses to answer and merely warns humanity to enjoy what remains of its peaceful age, because their king will soon descend. Locke ends the battle with one final strike, and the vampire's body turns to ash. Victory brings no relief. A stream of black-purple energy filled with cries and desperate voices rises from deep inside the fortress. Distorted faces appear within it before being drawn toward the demon sword. The weapon seems to absorb the accumulated hatred and suffering on its own. When the purple energy finally disappears, Locke finds himself surrounded by the remains of countless people who were imprisoned and killed there long ago. Locke kneels before one of the victims and apologizes for arriving too late. Outside the fortress, he discovers that the nearby village has also been completely destroyed. Defeating the vampire lord cannot bring any of those people back. Locke blames himself, believing that fewer lives might have been lost if he had uncovered the conspiracy sooner. He returns to the palace and reports that the enemy base has been eliminated, but the neighboring village was already beyond saving. Goran refuses to let his friend bear all the responsibility. As guildmaster, he will send people to recover the victims and give them proper burials. The debt of blood belongs to the great lord who ordered these crimes. Loanna is confirmed to have been affected only by charm. She was never fully transformed into an agent and can still be treated, bringing some relief to Charlotte and Marie. However, the moment the 6th rank died, 5 people inside the capital turned to ash, and approximately 30 others collapsed unconscious. The 5 who vanished were probably converted too deeply into servants, while the others were only under mental control. The simultaneous reaction proves that all of them were connected to the Lord Locke had just killed. It also exposes a vampire network rooted throughout both the capital and the royal palace. The palace is no longer secure, and no one knows how many people remain controlled by the other lords. Locke decides to stop chasing individual agents. He will destroy the Great Lord and cut the conspiracy off at its source. Eric and Goran immediately announce that they will join him. Locke reminds them that one is the king and the other is the guildmaster. If both fall, the kingdom may descend into chaos. Eric replies that his younger brother can inherit the throne. Goran also has someone capable of taking his position. Their roles as warriors in the coming battle, however, cannot be replaced. The 3 friends place their hands together as their legendary party reunites after 10 years. Chalice asks to accompany them, but Goran refuses because this battle is far beyond her current ability. This time she does not become angry or attempt to prove him wrong. She calmly acknowledges that she is not yet strong enough. Recognizing that change, Locke asks Goran to give his daughter a greatsword. Chalice fights very much like her father, relying on physical strength and direct close-range pressure. A longer weapon will allow her to use those advantages more effectively. Locke is not leaving his student behind because he underestimates her. Agents belonging to other lords may still be hiding inside the capital, and Chalice must protect Charlotte and Marie. When Locke calls her his disciple and entrusts her with such an important responsibility, she understands that this is not an excuse to remove her from the real battle. Another group of vampires soon appears and demands Gerberga. Chalice stands in front of Lucira with Goran's greatsword. The enemies laugh when she introduces herself as Locke's #1 disciple, the F-rank warrior Kellis Morton. She no longer loses her composure because of their mockery. Remembering Locke's lesson that even a moment of hesitation can decide life or death, Chalice attacks first. She refuses to give them enough time to look into her eyes and activate charm. The greatsword's reach forces them to defend continuously. When the vampires attempt to ignore her and seize Gerberga instead, Chalice calls for Lucira's support. The covering around the supposed divine rooster is removed, revealing a blazing image of Gerberga within their formation. Purple light shines from Lucira's eyes as her illusion spreads across the area. The vampires lose track of which target is real and which is false. The Gerberga inside the palace is only a decoy. The real divine rooster has traveled with Locke. Chalice and Lucira continue holding the defensive line, and Chalice promises that the situation in the capital can be entrusted to her. She finally understands how to fight while protecting the people behind her. Locke, Eric, and Goran ride toward the mountains, with the real Gerberga resting inside a small bag in front of Locke. The divine rooster occasionally pushes its head out because of the cramped space. Locke can only apologize for the discomfort and promise to keep it safe. Near the target, Shia and several beastmen warriors are already waiting. A tribal chief reports that many clans cooperated in the search and finally located the Great Lord's base. However, the number of vampires guarding the mountain is too great for their current forces to break through alone. Eric takes command of the operation. They will attack shortly before sunset, when the vampires have awakened but have not yet reached their full nighttime strength. Locke orders the werewolves to draw the outer guards away from the fortress. Their leader promises on the honor of his tribe that the task will be completed. Locke gives Shia the sword that previously endured a strike from the Demon King's blade without breaking. Eric carries the Holy Sword, while Goran wields a fire element demon sword, so this weapon should allow Shia to survive against the Great Lord. After confirming that it carries no curse, Shia accepts the sword and promises to protect Locke's back. At the location indicated by the beastmen, the group finds only a solid cliff. Shia cannot locate an entrance, but Locke opens his magic eye and discovers that the entire base is hidden behind an illusion. He casts a spell, causing the false rock face to disappear and revealing an enormous stone gate inside the mountain. Rather than charging in immediately, Locke releases a sleeping cloud through the corridors. The spell neutralizes most lower-ranking vampires before the assault begins, leaving only powerful elites and lords capable of resisting it. Goran leads the charge. The first group of high-ranking vampires is thrown into the flames of his demon sword. Shia realizes that the reputation of the hero party's frontline warrior was never exaggerated. Eric asks Goran to leave a few enemies for him, but Goran replies that such minor opponents are not worth the king's attention. Nearly 30 more vampires soon block their path. If the entire party remains to fight them, the Great Lord will continue growing stronger as night falls. Eric and Goran decide to hold the rear. Locke objects because the enemies surrounding them will also become stronger, but his friends simply smile and remind him of a debt from 10 years earlier. Together, they repeat the words that changed all three of their lives. Leave this place to us, and go ahead. 10 years ago, Luck remained alone inside the rift, giving them a path to survival before disappearing for an entire decade. This time, Eric and Goran are the ones remaining behind to open a path for him. It is both a tactical decision to prevent the Great Lord from gaining more power and their way of returning the trust Luck once placed in them. For the first time, he no longer has to carry everything alone. Locke remains silent for several seconds before smiling and entrusting the rear to his friends. He carries Shia through the surrounding formation. The vampires attempt to pursue them, but Eric and Goran block the way. Explosions and flames echo behind them as Locke and Shia enter the Great Lord's audience chamber. Human bones cover the hall, and behind iron bars lies a massive, unidentified substance with a green surface. The blindfolded Great Lord stands at the center of the room as though he has been waiting for them. The sinister pressure surrounding him surpasses every vampire lord Shia has ever encountered. Merely standing nearby makes it difficult for her to breathe. Locke detects a retaliatory barrier surrounding the enemy and immediately warns Shia not to charge recklessly. He advances with the demon sword to test the defense himself. The Great Lord blocks the strike using an eye-shaped magic circle on his palm. The collision between the barrier and the sword explodes between them. The two exchange positions so quickly that Shia can barely follow their movements. Realizing that Locke is more powerful than expected, the Great Lord opens a glowing eye and activates Charm. The spell that can turn allies against one another still fails to touch the Great Sage's mind. Locke coldly declares that the ability ability is useless. When the enemy asks his name, Locke replies that someone like him is not worthy of knowing it. Shia immediately attacks from the opposite direction with her new sword. The Great Lord avoids the strike with ease and mocks her for being too slow. What he fails to realize is that her attack was never meant to defeat him. The moment he shifts his body to evade the blade, he exposes the exact opening Locke has been waiting for. The demon sword flashes through the gap and cuts away the vampire's left hand. Shia understands that she is not fast enough to land a direct hit on this opponent. However, every time she forces him to react, she can draw his attention and create an opportunity for Locke. Their satisfaction lasts only a few seconds. The severed hand regenerates completely without leaving a mark. The Great Lord admits that Locke's sword is dangerous, but insists that it is still not enough to kill him. Black-purple magic gradually covers his body, and the pressure inside the chamber rises sharply. His regeneration erases the advantage they just gained and forces Locke and Shia to search for a new strategy. For the first time, Locke no longer appears as relaxed as he did while defeating the lesser vampires. He admits that the enemy is far more troublesome than expected. The true battle against an opponent comparable to the demon god has only just begun. Eric and Goran continue holding the rear line. Goran, as usual, is about to charge forward by himself when Eric immediately tells him to stop letting his courage outrun his judgment. A group of female vampires quickly surrounds Eric, but he cuts through them without much trouble. Then one of their doubles suddenly slips behind him, bites his neck, and attempts to use a mental ability to turn the king into her servant. Eric does not panic at all. He simply raises the hand wearing his wedding ring and calmly tells her that he already has a wife. The hero's blood running through his veins does more than resist poison. It also grants extremely high resistance to mental interference. Charm is almost completely ineffective against him. The plan to control the king collapses instantly. Eric launches a fierce counterattack while Goran continues preventing the remaining enemies from breaking through the defensive line. Deep inside the base, Locke notices that the Great Lord has become slower than before. In particular, the left arm that was previously cut still has not fully regenerated. That proves the enemy's recovery is not limitless. Shia immediately charges forward to maintain pressure, while Locke takes the opportunity to use Drain and steal away part of the Great Lord's energy. The enemy attempts to disperse into a swarm of bats and escape, but Gerberga pokes his head out of the pouch on Locke's chest and lets out a loud cock-a-doodle-doo at the exact moment of transformation. The boundary between the two forms becomes locked, forcing the Great Lord back into his original body. Only then does he realize that the divine chicken the vampires have desperately been searching for has been brought directly into his stronghold by Locke. Laughing, he reveals a hidden medallion inside his mouth. The atmosphere of the entire hall immediately changes. The purple core overhead erupts with light, and an enormous pressure forces both Locke and Shia down toward the floor. The Great Lord explains that this is divine protection granted by the gods on his side, and its mechanism is almost the exact opposite of the divine protection barrier surrounding the royal capital. In the capital, the stronger a vampire becomes, the more severely the barrier suppresses them. Here, the stronger an enemy is, the more intensely the barrier restricts them, while the vampires themselves receive additional power. Because Locke is stronger than Shia, the effect crushes him even more severely. His head feels as though it could split apart, and even lifting one arm becomes difficult. Meanwhile, the Great Lord continues gaining the advantage. He turns his attention toward Gerberga, intending to take the divine chicken for himself. Locke tries to raise a barrier, but his body barely responds. At that moment, he uses puppet dance again, the same magic that allowed him to survive for 10 years inside the rift. In the past, he controlled his own body, so it could continue fighting even while his consciousness rested. Now, invisible magical strings forcibly move his arms and legs despite the divine protection restricting every motion. Puppet dance restores enough mobility for Locke to examine the structure of the hall. He quickly identifies the purple core above them as the source maintaining the barrier. To win, they must destroy the mechanism that is suppressing them while strengthening the enemy. Shia understands immediately and charges forward to hold the Great Lord in place. She is quickly knocked back and mocked as nothing more than a stray dog, but she snaps back that she is a wolf and continues swinging her sword. She does not need to defeat him herself. She only needs to force him to react long enough for Locke to move. Using puppet dance, Locke drives his body straight toward the core. The Great Lord appears in front of him and grabs the demon sword directly with his hand, convinced that resistance is meaningless inside his divine protection. Locke simply tells him to look carefully at the hand holding the blade. Only then does the Great Lord notice that the wound on his palm is no longer healing as quickly as before. Golden rings of light suddenly appear around the purple core. Back in the royal capital, numerous priests are praying at the same time. The golden light restrains the core, sustaining the divine protection, and disrupts the Great Lord's regeneration advantage. Locke realizes that Levi and the priests in the capital have successfully provided support through holy magic. The Great Lord is horrified as the advantage he believed absolute suddenly disappears. Without regeneration erasing every wound, he finally becomes vulnerable. Locke pours his strength into the demon sword and cuts through his opponent. Gerberga continues crowing, preventing the Great Lord from reconstructing his body. The enemy who moments ago believed himself invincible has just enough time to admit that he never expected to lose here before disappearing completely. The pressure inside the hall vanishes. Shia returns to Locke and confirms that they have won, adding that thanks to his protective magic, she suffered only minor injuries. While searching the room, the two discover a wolf cub sleeping peacefully inside a cage. Shia confirms that it is not a monster belonging to the vampire faction, but a young wolf spirit beast. Werewolves and wolf spirit beasts are believed to share a common ancestor. The creature is intelligent and capable of understanding human speech, although Locke keeps staring at its face and cannot help thinking that it looks rather clueless. After Locke opens the cage, the wolf wakes and immediately bites his hand out of fear. Shia quickly reassures it that the man in front of it is the person who rescued it and that all the vampires inside the base have already been eliminated. The animal gradually calms down and begins looking guilty. Locke tells it that it is free and can go anywhere it wishes. He has no intention of forcing it to follow him. The young wolf, however, clearly decides that staying with this strange group is preferable to wandering alone, as long as no one plans to put it to hard labor. Locke and Shia then reunite with Eric and Goran, who have also finished clearing the rear line. Locke asks Eric to thank Levi because her holy magic saved them from being completely overwhelmed. Eric laughs and says Levi would probably be happier if Locke thanked her personally. Goran immediately jokes that the king certainly knows how to stay on his wife's good side. The life-or-death battle has barely ended, yet the three men are already talking like they used to. That familiar atmosphere finally removes the remaining tension. Before leaving the base, Locke looks at his two friends and says that this time, all of them are going home together. The words are simple, but completely different from what happened 10 years ago. Back then, Locke created the barrier and ordered Eric and Goran to leave, while he remained inside the rift for an entire decade. This time, no one will be left behind. The group walks outside together. Numerous Beastman warriors are waiting around the base for news. Eric raises his sword and announces that the Great Lord and the evil forces occupying the region have been defeated. However, he does not give all the credit to Locke. The victory belongs to everyone who fought. Cheers immediately erupt. Shia joins the celebration among her people, while Goran throws an arm around Locke's shoulders as if making sure his old friend does not disappear for another 10 years. The moment reminds Locke of his years inside the rift. 10 years ago, enemies were always in front of him, and behind him there was only himself. He lived alone for so long that he almost forgot what it felt like to rely on someone else. This time, Locke finally realizes that having companions protecting his back feels far warmer than he remembered. On the road back to the royal capital, the white wolf continues running stubbornly behind the horses. Shia explains that precisely because Locke gave it freedom, the creature is now able to choose for itself whether to follow him. Eric also suspects the wolf may no longer have anywhere else to return to. Locke gets down from his horse, approaches, and asks whether it genuinely wants to travel with him. The wolf does not run away. Instead, it sits still and willingly presses its head against his hand. Locke embraces it and says that from now on, they will be family. The wolf immediately presses closer to him, looking completely different from the frightened creature that first woke inside the cage. When the group returns to the royal capital, Charlotte and Marie run out to greet Eric. The two princesses are overjoyed that their father returned safely, and explain that Chalice and Lucera protected them very well. A pile of purple magic stones collected from the defeated vampires has been stacked in the courtyard. The two women report that approximately 20 enemies infiltrated the capital and that they personally defeated most of them. Locke carefully examines the loot and discovers that 2 of the stones belong to high-ranking vampires. Only then does Chalice remember that a few opponents did seem stronger than the others. However, she attacked before they could enhance themselves, so she never noticed a dramatic difference. Locke casually remarks that she really is Goran's daughter. Chalice freezes for a moment, while Goran finally says openly that, as her father, he is genuinely proud of her. Chalice immediately brightens and promises to continue training until she becomes an even greater warrior. In the past, Goran opposed his daughter becoming an adventurer because he feared that her reckless personality would eventually get her killed. Chalice interpreted that as her father refusing to acknowledge her ability. Now she has learned to observe the battlefield, understand her limits, and recognize that victory does not always mean destroying the enemy. Sometimes it means successfully protecting the people behind you. Goran's recognition therefore becomes a greater reward than any treasure she could have received. The group then returns to a more serious matter. The 2 high-ranking magic stones prove that powerful vampires can operate within the royal capital, despite the divine protection barrier covering the city. That means the enemy has discovered either a way through the barrier or a weakness that can be exploited. Locke suspects that the power of the dark god may be involved. Eric immediately decides that the entire defensive system must be reviewed. Locke proposes assigning Beastman warriors to guard the royal palace because they possess extremely high resistance to charm and are also difficult for vampires to turn into servants. Their ability to cooperate with humans was proven during the recent battle. Eric agrees to prepare appropriate compensation and treatment for them, while Shia considers protecting the palace a great honor for her people. From this point forward, the capital's defenses gain an additional layer specifically suited to countering one of the vampire's most dangerous abilities. Goran reminds everyone that the achievements from the operation will eventually be announced and rewarded. Eric tells Locke to request whatever he wants, but Locke has little interest in money or divine artifacts. Only when he looks toward Lucira, Gerberga, and the White Wolf constantly following him does he realize that his current family has become much larger than before. The only reward he asks for is a house. The request surprises everyone, while Gerberga and the wolf immediately throw themselves against him as though they fully approve. Elsewhere in the royal capital, a red-haired girl wrapped in concealing clothes wanders through the marketplace. She stares at a grilled meat stall but does not buy anything, then climbs a pear tree and eats some fruit instead. Her exhausted appearance suggests that she has been living like this for quite some time. Before she can rest, two men notice her in an alley. She immediately runs through the narrow streets and slips through a small opening close to the ground, hiding inside a large building. Not long afterward, Locke and the others arrive in front of that exact mansion. The moment he sees it, Locke thinks the house is far larger than necessary. Eric calmly explains that for someone holding the rank of Grand Duke, the mansion is actually somewhat modest. It once belonged to a baronial family whose bloodline ended. Inside are a massive hall, broad staircases, a long dining room, and countless empty bedrooms. The place certainly looks impressive, although every additional room also represents another room someone will eventually have to clean. Lucira volunteers to handle household work because she considers everyone part of the same family. Chellis claims the physically demanding chores because she is Locke's disciple, while Shia also announces that she will help. When rooms are assigned, Chellis casually chooses one for herself, forcing Locke to ask whether she genuinely intends to move in. She answers as though the decision was obvious from the beginning. Locke later goes outside and asks Goran what he thinks about the mansion. The guildmaster agrees that the building seems suitable but quickly notices that its construction is unusually fortified for the former home of a baron. In particular, the tower attached to the building resembles a watchtower more than a normal living space. Hearing that immediately makes Locke decide that the tower will become his room. Outside, the White Wolf happily runs around the enormous yard. Locke then reveals that he is named the animal Garv. The new house now contains Gerberga, Garv, and a growing collection of people who increasingly resemble a family rather than temporary companions. Night falls, and everyone gradually goes to sleep. Chellis shares a room with Shia, while Locke sleeps on a sofa elsewhere. After defeating the Great Lord and moving into a new home, he assumes that he can finally enjoy one peaceful night. Instead, Lucira suddenly appears carrying Gerberga and wakes him. She explains that while going to the bathroom, she heard a strange sound coming from somewhere beneath the mansion. It sounded like a person suffering from pain and extreme thirst. Locke immediately becomes fully alert and follows Lucira into the basement. The corridor below is dark and silent, completely different from the lively atmosphere that filled the mansion earlier. The deeper they travel, the clearer the groaning becomes. Eventually, they stop in front of a closed wooden door. A weak voice comes from the other side, repeatedly complaining of pain and thirst while begging someone to help. On the very first night inside the house, Locke requested as a home for his new family. The mansion has already revealed a hidden secret waiting behind the next door. On the very first night in the new mansion, before anyone has even had time to settle in, Lucira grabs Gerberga and drags Locke down into the basement. From behind a closed door comes a constant stream of painful groans and desperate pleas for help. It is midnight, the lighting is terrible, and Lucira's imagination immediately jumps to the worst possible conclusion. The house is haunted. Locke creates a light source and suggests they investigate. The moment they enter, a red-haired figure hanging upside down from the ceiling nearly scares him out of his skin. After taking a closer look, however, they realize there is no ghost at all. It is simply a young girl caught in a trap. Locke releases her and helps her down. The girl thanks him repeatedly, but Lucira still watches her with obvious suspicion. No matter how innocent the explanation may sound, appearing in someone else's basement in the middle of the night is difficult to classify as a normal visit. Burglary would honestly sound more believable. Locke refuses to jump to conclusions and questions her first. The girl introduces herself as Milka. When she learns that Locke is now the owner of the mansion, she hurriedly apologizes and explains that she believed the place was still abandoned and only entered because she needed somewhere to sleep. Her parents died long ago, and the grandfather who raised her recently passed away as well. Before his death, he had been tricked into taking on debt, and their house was eventually seized. In a short period of time, Milka went from being a poor child with one family member left to someone with nowhere in the world to return to. At that point, there is not much left to joke about. Milka did not break in looking for money, she was simply looking for a roof over her head. Locke asks whether she has been hiding here because she is afraid of being sold into slavery. Milka explains that King Eric abolished the slave trade around 8 years ago. Locke has to admit that his old friend did not become king merely to change chairs. Apparently, he has accomplished a few useful things. One mystery remains, however. How did Milka enter the basement in the first place? She points toward a hole connecting the building to the underground sewer system. While wandering around searching for somewhere to sleep, she discovered the opening and climbed through it. Locke inspects the area and realizes that beyond the hole is a staircase leading down into a hidden passage. The great sage suddenly feels rather foolish for accepting an entire mansion without properly inspecting it. He plans to seal the sewer opening later, but first he wants to learn where the secret corridor leads. Milka takes the opportunity to ask whether she could stay down here for a few days since nobody seems to use the place anyway. Locke does not answer immediately. He simply says they will decide after investigating the passage. When the group prepares to enter the corridor, Milka volunteers to walk in front. Her reason is disturbingly simple. If there is a trap, she will trigger it first and everyone behind her will have time to escape. Lucira is genuinely hurt hearing that. What kind of life did this child have to live for such an idea to seem normal? Locke places a hand on Milka's head and asks whether he really looks like the sort of person who uses children to test traps. Milka casually replies that wealthy people usually do things like that. Does she not? She says it without emotion, but the answer says plenty about what life has taught her. Locke immediately changes the formation. He will lead, Milka stays in the middle, and Lucira follows while carrying Gerberga. Locke continues maintaining his prestigious public identity as a seasoned F-rank adventurer. At the end of the corridor, the group encounters a completely sealed wall. To the naked eye, it looks like a dead end, but the moment Locke touches it, he senses an enormous concentration of magic. The entire section is protected by defenses powerful enough to remind him of the spells guarding the royal treasury. The instant Milka hears the word treasure, her eyes light up. Locke does not bother breaking the wall. A mage has more elegant methods. He first uses analysis to understand the structure, then traces each layer of the locking system, and finally applies Dispel magic. One magical formation after another appears and disappears. Lucira watches from the side as Locke dismantles security comparable to the royal palace as casually as someone opening a stubborn suitcase lock. When the final seal vanishes, the wall opens and light pours through. Unfortunately for Milka, there is no mountain of gold waiting on the other side. Instead, they find themselves looking into an elegant room. Locke immediately senses something is wrong and tells everyone to hide. The door suddenly opens and the person entering is none other than Eric. The king heard suspicious noises and came to investigate. Locke casually steps out and greets his old friend, while Eric is understandably shocked to discover Locke crawling into the royal palace through a hole in the middle of the night. After hearing the explanation, Eric confirms that the palace really does have a secret tunnel. 2 kings ago, the monarch had an affair with the widowed wife of a baron. The mansion Locke now owns had been prepared specifically for her, while the underground passage served as their private route between the 2 residences. The baroness had once had a son with her deceased husband, but that child was later adopted into a marquis family and inherited that household instead, eventually leaving the mansion's original family line without an heir. Eric is not especially worried about the tunnel connecting the palace to Locke's house. The more immediate problem is that there is currently an unlocked hole leading directly into the royal residence. Locke temporarily reinforces the palace entrance with magic and promises to install proper security the following day. On the way home, Milka becomes so exhausted that she falls asleep, forcing Locke to carry her through the passage. Lucira mentions the small green fruits Milka had been carrying. They are so bitter and unpleasant that almost nobody eats them voluntarily. It is a small detail, but it makes painfully clear how little Milka has had to survive on recently. Lucira asks whether they can let her stay. Locke replies that he had already planned to do exactly that. The new mansion has barely gotten used to its owner, and its population is already increasing. The following morning, Milka wakes up in a proper bed. She steps into the enormous hallway and barely has time to figure out where she is before her stomach begins growling loudly. Then she meets Garv. The wolf spirit beast notices an unfamiliar face emerging from the bedrooms and immediately charges, pinning Milka to the floor. The girl turns pale with terror. Yesterday she was worried about finding dinner. This morning she briefly thinks she has become breakfast. Fortunately, Locke arrives in time and orders Garv to release her. He even pats the wolf on the head and praises him for doing his job properly. Milka's scream brings Chelis, Shia, and Lucira rushing into the hallway. Locke introduces Milka and tells everyone that she can live here from now on if she wants. Milka can barely believe what she is hearing. Locke even gives her responsibility for cleaning and household chores, telling her to ask Lucira whenever she does not know how something works. Milka accepts immediately. To her, this is more than employment. It is a place she can finally return to. Lucira happily declares that the family has gained another member. Breakfast feels like a banquet to Milka. She happily eats everything placed in front of her, while Chelis keeps adding more food to her plate. As the newest member of the household focuses on filling her stomach, Goran arrives to discuss the secret tunnel. Locke plans to reinforce the entire route, seal the damaged wall connecting it to the sewer, and install a locked door at the palace entrance so only authorized people can use it. Goran agrees that keeping the passage is worthwhile because it could serve as an emergency escape route. The only part that confuses Shia is the collection of traps throughout the corridor. If the old king and the baroness regularly use the tunnel themselves, why would they cover their own route with traps? Locke suggests that the traps were probably intended to stop a third person from following them. The moment Goran hears third person, his mind immediately goes to the queen. The entire affair becomes even more shameless the more they think about it. If the king's lawful wife ever tracked the pair all the way into that tunnel, meeting a ghost might honestly have been less terrifying. With the housing problem temporarily settled, everyone divides up the day's errands. Shia plans to visit the Adventurers Guild, so Locke asks her to check on Ario and Ginny. Chellis notices that the mansion is enormous, but missing many basic cleaning supplies, while Locke also needs materials to repair the damaged section of wall. At the shopping district, Milka is told to wait with Garv, while Locke and Chellis enter a building materials store. She agrees, but soon notices a nearby household goods shop because the mansion still needs brushes and mops. Somehow, in broad daylight, Milka is kidnapped. When Locke and Chellis return, she is nowhere to be found. Fortunately, Garv's sense of smell allows them to quickly track her to an alley where several men are holding her. They bring up the debt left behind by her grandfather. Milka protests that their house was already taken and that an official had told her she was not responsible for a dead relative's debt. These men, however, apparently operate under their own version of financial law. Grandfather borrows, granddaughter pays. The leader even talks about selling her. At that point, Locke has heard enough. Several thugs rush forward to stop him and are dealt with immediately, while Chellis quickly pulls Milka out of danger. Locke keeps one man conscious long enough to question him. The thug admits that they work for Cabino Donovan, the man who controls money-lending operations throughout the poorer districts. Their objective was to force Milka to repay her grandfather's debt. Locke points out that she is a child. The thug casually responds that Milka could fetch a good price if sold through an underground network, then helpfully reveals that Cabino used to be a slave trader and still maintains his own private trafficking connections. Locke barely has to investigate. Cabino's own subordinate has practically recited the indictment for him. The city guards arrive and take custody of the thugs, but the more questions they ask, the worse the situation becomes. Cabino is not some insignificant street lender. He possesses genuine influence throughout the slums and keeps enough men under him to resemble a private army. He also has deep connections with the nobility. The authorities previously obtained evidence of his crimes, but before they could act, the entire case was mysteriously buried. Nobody knows exactly which noble is protecting him. Still, when criminal records conveniently disappear at the perfect moment, it becomes obvious that Cabino has survived this long through more than sound business ethics. Locke left home that morning intending to buy a mop. News that his men have been arrested quickly reaches Cabino. He understands that this is no longer merely a debt collection problem. The city guards are involved now, and the Adventurers Guild has begun interfering as well. His first response is to move all of his merchandise somewhere else before anyone can search the property, while simultaneously recalling his strongest fighters. Among them are several former adventurers who left the guild at C rank. Just as Cabino's people are secretly loading restrained children onto wagons, Locke arrives at the entrance. He says that originally he only intended to settle the matter involving Milka, but after finding an entire shipment of tied-up children in front of him, Cabino has very kindly packaged the evidence himself. Cabino demands to know who Locke is. Locke remains loyal to his new public persona, a veteran F-rank adventurer. The thugs probably assume the authorities accidentally sent them a punching bag. The first man charges and is immediately dodged and slammed to the ground. The next attackers receive roughly the same treatment. Locke dispatches them so quickly that Cabino gradually understands that ordinary men are useless here. His two strongest former adventurers finally step forward and stop their own allies from charging recklessly. They claim their current ability is equivalent to B rank. One carries a great sword, and both are extremely confident, even warning Locke that they will not hold back simply because he is unarmed. Before Locke can accept the challenge, Chellis and Shia appear behind him. Chellis immediately draws her weapon and asks her master to leave these two opponents to his disciple. Cabino's supposed trump cards have barely entered the field, and the other side is already treating them like training partners.